there was a family going on vacation in the car, and they came to a roadblock, said, detour, turn this way, and the dad looked at his Google and says, there's no detour in Google. I'm going to just go for it. And it's like, I know better. It's going to save us a whole lot of time if we go this way. So he went, and he's driving along feeling pretty good about himself that he was able to discern that there really wasn't a problem in the road until he got to a washed out bridge. Had to turn around, came back. He gets to the beginning where that detour sign was, and on the back it says, welcome back, told you so. What was in his way? His own feeling that he knew better. This happened to me about a month ago. I was running around Sloan's Lake, and on the south side of the lake, there's a playground and tennis courts, and the playground was getting redone. So they were tearing it all out, and there was a sign that said detour, and there was fencing up, and I thought, I can probably get through. And I go all the way to the fence, and no, there's no way to get through unless I could walk on water, which I'm not Jesus, so I wasn't able to do that, so I had to turn around and go back the other way. And actually, the detour was wonderful. It was shaded, it had all these mature trees, it was a dirt trail, very nice. This week, that detour is still there. I'm used to it. I'm like, I'm going to just go this way all the time. The tennis courts had a detour, which are a little east of the playground, another fence, another really, are they really gonna block the yes, sure enough. You gotta, walk on water to get around the fence. So I go back and this time the detour is on the street, and I'm not happy. And I kind of yelled out loud at the situation. And I got home and I was telling Kevin, well, this wasn't a very pleasant run. I was all worked up, and it's not the way of the Tao. What was in the way? My own thought. Only the difference of a thought. I could have just let that go. What we're talking about today is Taoism. And we've been telling you it's going to be Buddhism, and circumstances came up this week that we had to change to Taoism at the last minute. Janice had to change all the music. I had to change the talk, and that's the Tao. That's going with the flow. We just had to go with the flow. So we're talking about Taoism. We're continuing this series on unity and world religions using Paul John Roach's book, Unity and World Religions. He's a unity minister, and this has been a great book, and it's been very challenging to me as well, trying to learn about each of these and discern what to present to you. But today is Taoism, and Taoism is so fascinating. It's more of it's a religion and a philosophy. It dates back 2,500 years in China. And they're not even quite sure. It's attributed, the Tao Te Ching is the name of the one sacred text, and it's attributed to Lao Tzu, but they're not even sure if he was really an actual person or not. So there's a lot of discrepancy on it. Also, there is Chuang-Tzu, who lived in the 4th century, and he continued the writing. He was an actual person. And both of these writings are just really about life and about the Tao, which Tao literally is translated as the way. And T-E, Tao De Jing, is virtue. And then the Jing is, what is the Jing? I didn't write down the Jing. Well, it'll come to me. Tao Te Ching is only 81 verses. It's very short. They're short verses. And there are so many translations of it, you wouldn't believe. It's translated almost as much as only second to the Bible for all the translations there are of this sacred text. There's about 9,000 Taoist temples in China, and there's a lot of discrepancy on how many followers of Taoism. One source I read said 8.7 million followers, another said 173 million followers, so hard to tell. Because to be a follower of the Tao, all you have to do is decide you're going to study the text. So there could be a whole lot of people that are studying it and don't consider themselves Taoists. It really appeals to people who are spiritual but not religious. So there could be a whole lot in this country because that's the number one group in this country. But what is in the way? What's in the way? The way of the Tao. You know, there's a lot of tension in the world today. The Taoist perspective could be useful to bring some peace. Its teachings are compassion, simplicity or moderation, and humility. These are not traits we see a lot of right now in society. When we see differences, we are often judging. And in the Tao, we're to embrace the differences. They're to be celebrated, these differences. They're essential to each other. And we've got this image of, you probably recognize this, the Yin and Yang, which is very central to Taoist teachings. It has the life's oppositions. The yin is the dark part, and the yang is the light part. And each of them have a dot of the other, a seed of potential of the other within them. These are opposites such as life, death, male, female, good, bad, right, wrong, positive, negative, summer, winter. But I love how Houston Smith says in The World's Religions, he describes this yin yang. The halves are in tension, but they are not flatly opposed. They complement each other. Each invades the other's hemisphere and takes up its abode in the deepest recess of its partner's domain. And in the end, both find themselves resolved by the circle that surrounds them, the Tao, in its eternal wholeness. In the context of that wholeness, the opposites appear as no more than phases in an endless cycling process, for each turns incessantly into its opposite, exchanging place with it. Life does not move onward and upward toward a fixed pinnacle or pole. It bends back and forth upon itself to come full circle to the realization that all is one and all is well. I love that. If we could just look at life that way, that we're not competing with each other, we're swaying with each other, we're dancing with each other. It's always in motion. It's not static. There's no hard line that this way or that way, but instead it's in a fluid motion. It's like a bamboo tree, how it sways, or a palm tree sways with the wind. It doesn't break because it's not rigid. It's flexible. It's strong. It's also like the wind shifting for a sailboat, shifting the sails. And what does a sailor do but just change course or switch out the tack or the, what is that called? I don't know what it's called. The jib. Thank you, the jib. And sometimes there is no wind. And sometimes there's a very strong wind, and you just have to go with the flow, as a good sailor would know that. It says in one of the verses in the Tao Te Ching that sometimes the strong winds of the morning die down. There's always change going on. We need to be flexible, says the Tao. Be flexible and just allow. There's an old ancient story called Only a Bowl of Rice in the Taoist tradition, and there's two young men, who are working and feeling like they're not getting anywhere in their jobs and they're not being treated fairly. And they hear of this wise old sage, and they decide separately that they're both going to go talk to this sage and find out what should they do. What do you do about this job situation that isn't working out? And they meet up as they're about to meet the sage and find out that they're both there for the same reason. So they decide that they will go in together and ask their question together because it's the same situation. So they go into this wise old sage and they tell him their story. My job, I'm not being treated well, I'm not getting ahead, I'm not getting anywhere. And the sage says, let me meditate on that. So he meditates, and the two guys are sitting there, okay, when's he going to have an answer? And the sage finally opens his eyes and says, only a bowl of rice. And the two men, look at each other and walk out, and they're like, what do you think that means? And both of them get it at the same time, only a bowl of rice. The bowl of rice represents our daily needs. We're getting our daily needs by working in this job. So the one guy decides when he goes back to work that he's going to quit his job because he's only getting his daily needs met. He goes back to his family farm. He takes all that he's learned from living in the city and this company and buys good seeds and becomes an expert farmer. And he's known far and wide and becomes very successful. The other young man decides only a bowl of rice means to him, well, maybe I'm putting too much into this. And he decides that he's going to change things up in his work. He's going to give more. He's going to take on new challenges. He's going to do above and beyond. And he gets promoted and promoted and promoted and becomes very successful. And so years later, these two men happen to meet up with each other. And they start telling each other, oh, yeah, well, I quit my job, the one guy says. And the other one says, well, I stayed in my job. And the one says, well, why did you quit your job? Why did you go back to the farm? And he said, isn't it obvious? Isn't it obvious? Only a bowl of rice meant, I'm only getting a bowl of rice for all that effort. I need to go do something else. And so I became very successful farming. And the other man said, well, what about you? Why did you stay in the job? And he said, well, isn't it obvious? Only a bowl of rice meant I wasn't giving enough effort at work. I needed to give more. And I became very successful in my job. And they both looked at each other and said, this doesn't make any sense. How could only a bowl of rice, that one answer, have two different paths? We need to go to this sage and ask him which one was the right path. See how we start thinking as humans? There's only one right way. Let's judge it. So they go to the sage and they explain the situation. And the sage, very wise, said, let me meditate on this. So he meditates as they're sitting there. They're looking at each other, both thinking my way is going to be the right way. And the sage opens his eyes and he says, only a difference of thought. Now, this is a typical Tao story. You might think, well, that's not a very good answer. Which one was the right way? But that's our right-wrong thinking. That's our duality thinking, that there's only one way. In Tao, everything is important. Every path is important, and nothing is fixed. There are many ways to get to the same destination. It's like a downward stream of water and how it just kind of breaks off and goes all its different ways, but they all get to the ocean. The Tao says to look at all decisions, both small and big decisions. Each is worthy of attention. Each is worthy of our attention. And it doesn't really matter which way we take, which path we take. They all lead to the same. Some paths may be longer. Now, both of these men became successful. Maybe one of them would have taken a different path and not been successful. They're all going to still end up the same place at the end of their lives. The Tao has no agendas. There's no agenda. It just is. It's like spirit in our unity teachings. It just is. We just need to allow it. Don't try to figure it out, but always practice it. So we've been looking at these different world religions in relation to unity's 5 principles. If nothing else, you're going to really know unity's 5 principles by the end of this series. So the first principle is God is. There is only one power, one presence in the universe, God. In Taoism, there's no mention of God, no God that we would think of as we often think of God as a being or an entity, but they do talk about the Tao, which is the source of everything, that which is behind everything. It's an energy, it's a force. It's ineffable. It means you can't even describe it. The first chapter of the Tao Te Ching says that you can't, it's given a name, but you can't really name it. Just like Moses in asking, what is your name? I am that I am. It's not really a name, because once we name something, we limit it, and there is no limit to spirit. There is no limit to the Tao. The second unity principle is we each have that spark of divine within us. We have that potential, that God essence within us. And I like what Paul John Roach says about this in the Unity and World Religions book. Taoism constantly refers to the essential harmony and order of the universe and how it flows through all things. Human beings are in an intrinsic relationship with the Tao. We are one with the Tao. We are that. The Tao is in everything. Just like we say spirit is in everything, in fullness. And therefore we, as the Tao is eternal, we too are eternal. The third unity principle is using our minds to create our experience of life, using our thoughts to create our experience of life. In the Tao, in Taoism, this approach is subtle. There's no intention to improve yourself or improve your life in Taoism. It's more of accepting, but to open and allow a spaciousness to create and express, just like the bowl of rice, only a difference of thought. How our thoughts will determine which way we're going to go, how we're going to experience life. This aligns with our third unity principle. I love Paul's, he said one of his favorite verses in the Tao Te Ching is the 36th verse. And this helps him to stay centered, knowing that keep his thoughts in alignment with the spiritual being that he is and not just the ego. It says, if you want to shrink something, you must first allow it to expand. If you want to get rid of something, you must first allow it to flourish. If you want to take something, you must first allow it to be given. This is called the subtle perception of the way things are. The soft becomes the hard, the slow overcomes the fast. Let your workings remain a mystery to show people the results. I love that, and how there can be so many different interpretations of that. But remember that the Tao is generous and embracing. And so how we think is going to change how we experience our lives. The fourth unity principle is we use prayer and meditation to align ourselves with that divine essence that is within us. Now, in Taoism, there is no prayer to a god or to a being or to anything, but it's more a way of life in Taoism. It's a way they live. It's a philosophy. There's a deep respect for all life. And we want to, in Taoism, stay in that harmony, stay in that flow of life. And then the fifth unity principle is we have to act. Now, in Taoism, they talk about Wu Wei, which is action without attachment. That there is action, but it's very subtle. It's never forcing. It's never trying to come to a certain result. It's creative, let it be. As Jan is saying, let it be, as we all sang. Creative, letting it be. Wayne Dyer spent a year in his later years studying the Tao Te Ching in 10 different translations of it, interpretations of it, and wrote a book called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, which is a beautiful book if you haven't read it. He takes all 81 of the verses and gives his interpretation of them. And this one, for this I act, fifth unity principle, I love that Wayne Dyer says this, the seventh verse is serve the need of others and all your own needs will be fulfilled. Through selfless action, fulfillment is attained. The seventh verse suggests we choose to exist for more than ourselves or our tribe, which is beautiful. That's action and taking action in the world. This week I had to give myself a crash course in Taoism. And I read several different translations, and I was reading them, and I was getting very frustrated because I'm thinking, they don't even say the same thing. They're all different. And then I thought, well, isn't that what we do with the Bible? Aren't there lots and lots of different translations of the Bible? Aren't there infinite number of interpretations of the scriptures? Just pick one. Pick one that has meaning to you. Pick one where you gain clarity or you gain understanding or you have some wisdom about your life. Pick one that will help you see things from a different perspective, maybe. Let it be and go with the flow. That's the way of the Tao, to just go with the flow. A difference of thought can result in different results, in different actions, a different life. No longer my way, but appreciate the verses. Appreciate that detour that fence took me on. Not the one in the street, I'm not there yet. But the one on the dirt path with the shade. So what's in the way? What's in the way? What's in the Tao? What's in your way of living a more simple life, of living a more humble life, of living a more compassionate life? These are the three things the Tao Te Ching focuses on in Taoism. Humility, moderation, and compassion. Why not try something different? In the Tao, it says if you have a tendency to go a certain way, go the other way. If you have a tendency to act a certain way, act the opposite. Just try it. What's that commercial? Try it. You'll like it. Why not try something different, a different way? Change it up. Stephen Mitchell, this is one of the more popular interpretations of the Tao Te Ching. And in verse 74, it says, if you realize that all things change, there is nothing you will try to hold on to. If you aren't afraid of dying, there is nothing you can't achieve. Isn't that beautiful? This week, try one new thing. Change it up in one way and see how a different perspective you might have. See how the opposites, instead of judging the opposites, appreciate the opposites. And see how they change your perspective and how they're really not in your way at all. They're only a difference of thought. Peace be with you. Namaste.